Good morning, everybody, and welcome to MS Ireland's Newly Diagnosed programme. My name is Aoife Kerwin. I am the Information Advocacy and Research Officer with MS Ireland. We understand that for a lot of you, today will be the first step that you might have taken towards becoming involved with MS Ireland, and we're absolutely delighted to have you join us this morning. We hope that you find today's sessions useful and valuable. MS Ireland is the only national organisation providing information, support and advocacy services to the MS community. We understand as well as kind of a funny situation for us now, because we're online with this, whereas normally a newly diagnosed programme would be held physically. We're doing it virtually, obviously, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the important thing for us is that you get the information that you need. The one thing that we feel would be very beneficial is if you had the opportunity to meet your regional community worker face to face. But we just want to let you know that the information for the contact information for all regional community workers is available on our website, and they are there to support you. They work throughout the country and they can help you with any individual case work that may need to be done. So if for any support, you can find the contact information on the website and you can get in contact with them. So I am going to just introduce our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Maria Keogh. She is a chartered physiotherapist and has worked with MS Ireland's physiotherapy since 2008, when we started our Getting the Balance Right programme. She's heavily involved in the programme over a number of years and delivering physiotherapy programmes directly to people living with MS while conducting scientific research into the effects of physiotherapy and MS. So Maria brings an absolute wealth of scientific and practical experience with her today, and we hope that you find her presentation very useful. If you have any questions, we'd ask you to send them in through the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So we'll hold them and then we'll ask them at the end of Maria's presentation. And with that, I'll hand you over to Maria. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Aoife, for a lovely introduction. So as Aoife said, my name is Maria Keogh and I'm a chartered physiotherapist. And my very first introduction to working with MS Ireland was actually back in 2006, when, as an undergraduate student, I did a project on barriers to exercise experienced by people with multiple sclerosis. And after that point, through working with MS Ireland and then in my postgraduate studies and then throughout my professional life, I've always had a great relationship with MS Ireland. They're a fabulous organisation, and this morning, as well as the research behind exercise and physiotherapy interventions for people with MS, some practical tools on what you can do to get started. I will let you know about some classes that we're running online at the moment as well. So MS Ireland are running classes throughout the country. Since the beginning of the pandemic, very early in March, we got going with our online programs. So there's something for everyone, lots of different levels and everything. So without further delay, I'm going to just share a screen with you, which is my PowerPoint presentation. So I hope this works okay now for everybody. Oh, so I hope everyone can see this okay. So just because we're new to working together on Zoom, I just kind of had a few little things that might make it a little bit more interactive, because when we're face to face, I'd be able to see you, you'd be able to see me, I'd be able to engage with you in a different way. So just to try and translate some of that to Zoom, I'm going to suggest that we kind of use, like we're here for about an hour chatting about exercise. So just to welcome your thoughts as well at very defined section breaks to facilitate participation. So it'll allow you to think about some of the strategies that you have. We'll talk about what your favorite types of exercise are, and you can use the chat box to facilitate that. Even if you don't particularly feel like commenting, emojis are encouraged. So like if there's something that resonates for you or something that you'd like to smile or clap about, feel free to use the chat box to make comments in that respect. And then we will, as Aoife said, have the comments and questions and answers at the end. So we'll do a formal Q&A and hopefully address anything that you might be wondering about. And then I think everybody's already muted during the presentation, just gets rid of any background noise for anybody. So the main aims of this morning's presentation are to firstly know that many of the main problems due to MS can be improved by exercise participation. When you're newly diagnosed, or sometimes I suppose there isn't any information available for people, and people have a lot of questions about, oh, is it safe? Is it going to make things worse? What is the likely response to exercise? And we'll be going through that, I suppose, a lot of the symptoms that can be really improved by exercise participation. To be empowered to participate in some kind of exercise. So we'll be going through all the different types that are beneficial and for what symptoms. And I'll show you some pictures and videos about things that you might like to try. And then we'll be going through some goal setting in relation to your own exercise plan, and to know where some of the resources are to guide you further. So in the beginning, so as Aoife said, back in 2008, MS Ireland was awarded Tesco Charity of the Year. So there was a significant amount of funding awarded to MS Ireland to begin to deliver exercise and physiotherapy interventions for people with MS. That funding was then matched by the Public Dormant Accounts Funds, and MS Ireland came to the University of Limerick, where we were at the time, and they were wondering, what questions do we need to ask? So there was some market research done to suggest that people with MS wanted physiotherapy and exercise interventions, and there was a question about yoga participation. But MS Ireland weren't sure about which physiotherapy or exercise programs they should deliver. So there was a big demand for it, but the evidence base at the time was, it was very much emerging. So when I was an undergraduate in college, you know, it was only becoming known at that point that exercise might be beneficial. Up until then, it was thought that exercise might make symptoms worse, might actually worsen the progression of the disease. But some research at the time really turned all that on its head, and now we know that it's incredibly beneficial with no adverse effects. So that, I suppose, gave way to the birth of Gelling's Balance Right project, which was a trial throughout the country where we looked at physiotherapy and exercise interventions for people with different levels of mobility. So we had 3 strands as such. There was strand A, those with minimal gait impairment; strand B, for those with moderate gait impairment who might use maybe 2 sticks to walk outdoors; and then strand C, which was for non-ambulatory people with MS. So there was really, I suppose, targeted interventions and something for everybody. So I was really involved in the strand A component of that. So that's the strand where people had mild or minimal or no gait impairments due to MS. Often you wouldn't even know that people had MS. You know, they were working, living their normal lives, and might have had hidden symptoms, for example, fatigue or bladder dysfunction, pain, lots of kind of symptoms, sensory dysfunction, those kind of things. So we had 3 different strands. There was physiotherapy, fitness instructor-led exercise, yoga, and then we had a control group. And we looked at how the different interventions compared over time, and I'll be going through some of those results this morning. So as I said, that was our Getting the Balance Right study, and a lot of the resources are still available online, and to this day MS Ireland continues to deliver these interventions across the country, albeit now we're doing it in a different format. So on a Wednesday night, I have one particular group that I run a class with, and I think some of them might be joined with us this morning. So over the course of an hour, we do a warm-up, some strength-based training, cool down, and then we chat about, you know, I suppose some advice about what would be encouraged during the week. And often very simple things that you have at home can be used for resistance exercise. And we'll be going through, you know, that in detail this morning in terms of the content of the interventions. So the good news is with the Zoom physiotherapy classes is that most people taking part are extremely satisfied. I think there could be 30 or 40 of them across the country. So like there's different physiotherapists who have different kind of slightly different approaches, different personalities. There are different levels, as I said. So there might be, you know, classes for people with minimal or no gait impairment, and that would be like one example would be the Wednesday night class that I do. Then there would be kind of maybe more balanced classes where people want to target that impairment, and there's seated exercise classes. So there's a really wide breadth of classes that can be delivered in this format safely. My previous PhD supervisor, Dr. Susan Coote, is really kind of doing Trojan work, leading the way on making sure that we're delivering these in a safe and effective way and evaluating the effectiveness of them. So we will be, I'll let you know a little bit more about that later on as well. So as I said, most people are really satisfied with these classes. 60% would choose online over in person going forward. So when you think about it, you don't have the commute time, you have access to your own toilet nearby. Some of the barriers that would have previously existed in terms of getting to exercise classes are no longer there. And even people who would refer face-to-face in the future are happy to participate online for now. So I think we all at times miss each other in the real life world and face-to-face. But I suppose in these times we just have to find a way on doing things a little bit differently. So in terms of the response to exercise, initially it was thought that it was harmful for people with MS to exercise because there was a transient or temporary worsening of symptoms during exercise. So for example, maybe blurred vision, maybe tingling or pins and needles, those kind of symptoms. And this is known as the Euttophs phenomenon. The good news is it's transient. So for the vast majority of people, this stops within half an hour of exercising. It can feel a little bit unpleasant if you're not expecting it or you haven't experienced before. And it's due to the demyelinated sheets that it just kind of interrupts the transmission of nerve conduction. So the good news is it's not doing any permanent damage. It will resolve quite quickly. And there are ways that you can minimize it. So things like exercising near a window, keeping cool, having a little fan nearby, opening up the doors while you're exercising, having a drop of water nearby, wearing cool clothes. So all of those things can help to try and keep the body temperature down. Some people notice when they get to sunnier climes or during hot weather in the summer and things like that, they may experience this as well. It doesn't happen to everybody, but when it does, rest assured it is transient. So as I said, previously it's thought that it was harmful because of this transient phenomenon. Now we know that it's really, really beneficial. And there was questions over time about what type might be the best type of exercise. But now we know we really have a choice because every type brings with it its own benefits. So really you can, I suppose, depending on what your goals are and depending on where you're starting from, may inform what choices that you make in terms of what you enjoy and things like that. So really we're in a great position now compared to maybe how we were 20 years ago. So just at this juncture, I'd love you to maybe consider using the chat box, and if you just have a little think to yourself about what might be the benefits of exercise, either in your experience or from your knowledge. What are the benefits of exercise? So yeah, super. So feeling good after exercise, it's good for your mental health. Focusing on something that's not MS, it lifts your mood. So a lot of things coming in about mood and mental health, fatigue, feeling better after exercise, good for your mind, great for your mental health, absolutely. And in these times, like, you know, there are some tough days, and there's a little H2C slogan, the more you move, the better your mood. So for sure, keeping more mobile, increased balance. So it's telling me to smile. Improves my mood, makes me more confident in myself that day, good for mental health. Great to see the participation here. So thanks folks for engaging this morning. Relax your mind and feel good. A good night's sleep, absolutely. When you use up energy during the day, it really helps to get a good night's sleep. And especially if you exercise outdoors, there's an interaction with your hormones that allows the melatonin to build up during the day, which means you get a better sleep at night. So if you can exercise outdoors, even better. Works on all aspects, overall improvement. Sorry folks, I'm not probably getting through all of the comments, but definitely there's some great suggestions there. Helps with stiffness. Super. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen there, and thank you all for your engagement. Um, okay, so some of the problems people with MS do experience. People with MS are not as fit as active or healthy controls or people with other chronic conditions. Um, that reduction in activity puts the risk of acquiring other secondary consequences of inactivity higher. So things like osteoporosis, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and even cancer. So the effects of being inactive are really quite serious. And even though you have a diagnosis, it doesn't preclude you from obtaining other diagnosis over time. In fact, it increases your risk because of that reduction in physical activity levels. So the benefits of exercise that everybody experience also apply to those who have been diagnosed with MS. Specific problems that people with MS would experience include fatigue, mobility issues, reductions in strength, bladder problems, and quality of life. And the great news is that exercise in robust scientific literature and research trials in terms of randomized controlled trials has been shown to improve all of these outcomes, particularly around fatigue. So often people feel worried that, oh, if I feel tired, exercise might make me feel worse. But a lot of the studies have shown that benefits of up to 20% can be seen. So if you're feeling tired and you've been sitting all day, move around, do some exercise, see if it makes you feel better, if it lifts your energy levels. But over a course of 3 months of persistent exercise participation, that's gradually progressive. So by that I mean that it's gradually getting a little bit more challenging, can really help improve fatigue levels. We did trials and people would have reported things like, they could stay up later to play with their grandchildren, read stories to them at night time, or being able to play with games with them out in the garden. And these are the results after participating in an exercise program over 3 months. So the benefits can translate to participation, quality of life, and meaningful changes in your energy levels that can apply to family life. And this slide is a bit wordy. It's a little bit before its time. So back in 1718, Frances Fuller was a female doctor, which was rare at the time. But basically, she's saying that if we could bottle the effects of exercise and turn it into a drug, then nothing in the world would be held in more esteem than that drug. So really, the benefits are multifactorial across a number of different, both I suppose the general benefits that everybody would obtain, but also in terms of specific symptoms relating to MS. So for people with minimal gait limitations, some of the benefits of specific interventions include increased fitness. Again, up to about 20% over 3 months would be expected when you just start an exercise program. Improvements in strength, again, 15 to 20%. Fatigue, gait parameters. So by that, we're talking about the quality of the gait, the speed of gait, distance walked, and quality of life. And that's both general quality of life and MS-specific quality of life. Progressive resistance exercise then is the type of strengthening exercise. So that's when you're moving your body weight or some external load. And the benefits are improved strength, cardiorespiratory fitness. So similar to that of aerobic exercise, but there's more of a focus on improving strength. Whereas with aerobic exercise, you'd expect that there'd be more improvements in cardiorespiratory fitness. So that's your heart and lungs. There would be improvements in fatigue for both types. Again, gait parameters and quality of life. So you can see that the benefits are, they cross the different types of exercise. When we talk about the parameters of exercise that are shown to be beneficial, so these are like how often, what type, what intensity. People often have a lot of questions about this. One of the most common questions we get is, how often should I exercise? Now, for the general population, it is recommended that we all try and achieve 30 minutes, 5 days a week. And this has definitely been shown to be tolerable in people with MS. It's shown to be acceptable. But this MS-specific guidelines, because they apply to people over a very broad spectrum of disease, so those with minimal gait impairment right up to people who are non-ambulatory or spend most of the time in a wheelchair, for example, the recommendations are twice a week aerobic exercise and twice a week resistance exercise at a minimum. So I suppose the benefits are, or the frequencies that are recommended are the minimal expectations and the minimal advice for health benefits. Generally, what we're seeing is, more is generally better across the general population. And again, it's about thinking about where you're starting from and gradually trying to progress towards what your goal might be. So if you have never exercised before, and then to suddenly go out and do, an hour a day, 5 days a week, that might not be realistic for you. But if you were to start maybe with doing maybe 10 minutes twice a day, or 10 minutes, just start somewhere is all I'd say, and just gradually nudge yourself forward so that you're gradually increasing your participation to at least the minimum, and then hopefully trying to exceed that over time. Now, with aerobic exercise, you're aiming for 60 to 85% of heart rate max. Now, most of us don't go around with heart rate monitors and things like that, but what that equates to is a moderate intensity. So if you could imagine a scale of 6 to 20, where 6 is no exertion at all and 20 is maximal exertion, you should be aiming for about 11 to 14. So you should be a little bit out of breath, or fairly out of breath, maybe a little bit red in the face, a bit sweaty, but still able to talk. So the talk test is key. Now you can increase that up to higher percentages. So you can go up to like 85% heart rate max, but maybe for shorter durations, because we wouldn't sustain those higher intensities for longer periods of time. And there have been studies that have looked at the feasibility of higher intensity exercise for people with MS with minimal gait impairment. There are a couple of examples throughout the media, and I hope they don't mind me saying this, but I know that their resources are available online. So one man up the north, his name is Conor Devine, and he's actually run marathons. Now, for anybody, that's an incredible achievement. But Conor also experiences MS and lives with MS. So he has an Instagram page. He's got a couple of books out. They're fabulous reads. So I suppose when you're thinking about like where you're coming from, where you're going to, it's not for everybody. I don't do marathons, and nor will I. But there is some great inspirational people out there who live with MS. And it's nice to kind of see what other people are doing as well sometimes for motivation and things like that. It's very inspiring. So the types of aerobic exercise that are shown to be beneficial: cycling, running, walking, aquatics, probably doesn't really matter. As long as you're getting that heart rate up, you're getting that fitness benefit. Now, in terms of, when I say it doesn't really matter, in terms of the fitness side, probably not. However, in terms of specificity, it probably does matter. So if you would like to improve cycling, then I suppose the more cycling you do, the better you get at it. If you'd like to improve walking, the more walking you do, you're really working specifically on walking. However, some people with MS do find that they don't have the balance when they're walking to get these higher intensities. So particularly if you have a UTAF's phenomenon, maybe a little bit of unsteadiness when you walk, the more and more you're walking, you get maybe like a little bit more unsteady. So that can be a challenge in getting to those higher intensities. So it's about just varying it up a little bit. Maybe in order to work on your aerobic fitness, you're doing maybe cycling or something that will support your balance. Now, I know in these times it's hard to do aquatics. By that we mean even hydrotherapy. So it can, like, the pools are closed at the minute, but in the water helps to support your balance. So at waist height, it's holding about 50% of your body weight. So some people find with that unloading, they're able to achieve those higher intensities. And the recommended timing or duration then is 30 to 45 minutes at a time. Then with your progressive resistance exercise, so this is your strengthening, twice a week minimum is recommended. The reason for this particular type of exercise is really around strength. So to improve strength, it's about targeting your strengthening exercise, but this is really crucial as well for bone health. So if you are doing strengthening exercises, you're also loading your bones as well through your muscles, and this can help to improve your bone density, which I suppose prevents against osteopenia and osteoporosis. And especially in the context of MS, where people might be, less active than normal, maybe not weight bearing in some cases, or on steroids, maybe for courses during their illness, which worsens bone density, then the strengthening really, I can't highlight it enough. So we'll be particularly focusing on some of the demonstrations of those exercises. So upper limb and lower limb calisthenics. So that basically means using your body weight to move around, and then gym-based machines, but you can use free weights as well. And like, you mightn't have any gym equipment at home, but there's lots of things that you can use at home that allow you to load your muscles and your bones. So with strength training, the key is that it needs to be progressive. So in order to get the benefits, you definitely need to be gradually nudging yourself forward over time. So it's making it a little bit more challenging week by week. So you're increasing the load by increasing the weight, or maybe increasing the repetitions. You can change your body weight positioning around, and I'll show you a push-up example shortly where you can gradually make it a little bit more challenging. So this was the original Getting the Balance Right intervention. So this focused particularly on the strength-based activity, because when we met people face to face, it was an opportunity to go through some of the strength exercise. And a lot of people were already, I suppose getting the aerobic exercise is sometimes a little bit more achievable outside of the class setting. So you can go for a walk, you can go for a run, you can get for a swim or a cycle. People often don't need a massive amount of instruction on gradually getting the aerobic exercise up. So we did a little bit within the class just to make sure people were getting to the right intensities. But here are some examples of exercises. So you have your sit to stand or your squat. And just showing you the first image there, so you can see that our model is using her hands. So if the balance is a little bit tricky, or the strength in the legs isn't as strong as you'd like it to be, you can use your hands on the armrests or the surface that you're standing on. You can gradually progress that to keeping your arms folded, and then gradually progressing to not using any support, and then even progressing that further, holding onto a weight, for example. And you can progress that further, like all the way up. So by moving your leg position under guidance, that can help to challenge one leg more than another, and things like that. So this is going to work the quadriceps, which is the muscles at the front of the legs. And then you have bridging, which is lying on your back, feet bent up. And then you can see that our model is lifting her hips off the floor and progressing that to one leg variations. You can progress that with weights as well, lots of examples. And as I said, there's so many classes going on at the moment, and a physiotherapist can guide you through some of these exercises safely. Then you have your shoulder flexion. So you might not be able to see very clearly there, but she has a weight in her hand. There's your treadmill exercise or your cycling. So they will be examples of aerobic exercise. If your elbow curls, so I always think of nice examples about why your elbows or why your arms would need to be strong. So things like going shopping or lifting the turkey out of the oven at Christmas, and you need good strong muscles to be able to do those kind of things. Then you have your lunge, which again works your glutes and your quads. And we find that and the research does support that people with MS are affected more usually in the legs than in the arms. So we really try and focus on strengthening for the legs. You have your hip extension and your calf raise. So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen for a moment, and I'm going to show you some of these in a dynamic format. So now, so I hope you can see the video here. Please give me a shout if you can't. So here you can see our model on the box. And just a simple sit to stand is going to work the glutes at the back of the hips and your quads at the front of the thighs. So that's something you can so easily do in your sitting room. And the main thing is, before you exercise, I suppose, just make sure that you're medically well, so that you don't have any chest pain at rest or on exertion, no unexplained breathlessness, no uncontrolled high blood pressure. If you've never exercised before, to discuss your intention to exercise, maybe with your GP. But for a vast majority of people, it's safe and very effective and beneficial. Just going to show you a few more examples here. I have to thank my husband, he did this for me. And what I'm going to do after today's presentation is we'll just put together one link that everybody can access. So there'll be a kind of a very simple exercise program that you can follow with these videos as well. So this is an example of a scaled push-up. So if you have a countertop in the kitchen or an island or something that won't move, something that won't give from under you, and literally our participant here is bringing the elbows in close to the body and bringing the chest towards the surface. So worktop works really well for this one. But if you find that too challenging, there are other ways that we can scale that. So for every single exercise that we have, we can make it easier, we can make it harder, we can vary it up. The beauty of the Zoom classes is I'd be able to see you, or your physiotherapist would be able to see you. You can actually give real-time feedback on the quality of the movements, the intensity that people are working at. So there's a nice variety there. Now this is a full push-up. I don't suggest anybody starts with that. But certainly a starting point that we often go for is maybe the worktop or even the wall. Like if that's too hard, just pushing up against a wall can be a nice one. I'm going to show you one more as well because I really like this one. I hope it'll work for us. Hopefully this will work now. There's our bridge. So lifting the hips up. Yeah, so this one here. Oh, no, sorry, that's this one. Here we go. So this one can be done simply with a pair of tights. So if you don't have an exercise or resistance band, basically you tie your pair of tights onto something that won't move. You can also do it in a kind of seated position where you have them around your feet. And you're basically pulling back, squeezing between the shoulder blades and releasing the hands out. So you can get resistance bands, through sometimes Aldi or Lidl or various online shops. But a pair of tights can even just do the same job. And you'll often find that you have things at home that you can use for your strength-based training. School bag with a bag of books, for example, you could, use that while you're doing a sit to stand. There are loads of examples. So I just see a couple of questions there, and I can't see anybody on this presentation. I will be sharing the presentation with you guys afterwards. I think MS Ireland are going to circulate it to everybody, and I will also share an exercise link with you as well so that you can see some exercises through videos. But I did strongly encourage you to, I suppose, firstly go through, make sure that you're safe to participate in exercise. So maybe just have a discussion with your GP about your intention to start if you've never done anything before. And we also have our Zoom classes, so we have a particular screening as well that makes sure that everything is suitable for you, and then you can get tailored exercises specific for your goals and your ability. Okay, so just going back here. Okay, so the long-term effects of exercise, basically these graphs just show that once you stop, the benefits dissipate over time. So you see massive improvements during exercise, so reductions in fatigue, reductions in the impact of MS, both the physical and the psychological, and then over time they're going back up to baseline. One of the benefits in terms of the psychological impact of MS can be maintained beyond the exercise program. The beauty of doing the classes as well is that you get that peer support. So knowing that there's other people in a similar boat, and also ideas on management strategies and sharing tips and tricks learned over time. So for people, anybody with moderate gait impairments, as I mentioned before, we had a strand previously that was for people who use bilateral aid, and things that have been shown to be safe and effective include aerobic exercise, again, progressive resistance training, body weight support treadmill training. Now that wouldn't be widely accessible in Ireland. I think there's a couple of body weight support treadmill training, but it's basically a treadmill with suspension. So it's kind of like a hoist for all the world, and it holds you up while you're walking on the treadmill, so it unloads some of your body weight. Neuromuscular electrical stimulation, so that would be where there's external stimulus to the muscle in order to contract it, and strength and balance intervention. One of the main benefits for exercising is if you have balance impairment, actually exercise, so in the form of strength and balance training, can improve balance. The consequences for unsteady balance include things like falling, both huge impact for the person, but then also in terms of the cost of a fall, for in terms of the healthcare expenditure, the impact for the person, and loss of balance and use of a walking aid is a key predictor of falls in people with MS. So some examples of exercise, now this mightn't be as clear to see, but again, sit to stand might be a strengthening exercise that will be appropriate. But again, in this instance, maybe you're holding on to something for support, using your hands for sit to stand, or holding on to something during a squat. Calf raise, so that's up on the tippy toes at the back of the chair. Step ups, and again, you might use a grab rail, so stepping up, stepping down. And tandem step, so that's where you're standing almost like on a tightrope, but again, having something close by that's safe and immovable that you can hold on to in a hurry if you need to, and sidestepping. And we do balance exercises even in our Zoom classes as well, so we know that we can do that safely using props and prompts, and often people have people at home with them as well during the classes, so it's a lot safer than we would have thought going into it. So basically, I suppose, just to summarise where we are at the moment, people with MS have as much and more to gain than healthy controls by participating in structured exercise. There's many different effective exercise interventions, and there's no difference between a lot of the interventions on some of the important outcomes like cardiorespiratory fitness, in terms of fatigue and quality of life. Specificity is important, so it's really, really dependent on what you want to achieve, that will, I suppose, influence the type of exercise that you want to participate in. So if you want to get stronger, strengthening exercise is the one to do. Your preference has a huge part of it, so what's accessible to you, what's enjoyable. If you're not going to enjoy it, you're not going to do it. So it's really, really important that you do something that you enjoy. Something is always better than nothing, even if it's just a step outside during the coffee break or the comfort break afterwards, and do some arm circles, marching on the spot in a few sit to stands, and taking a few deep breaths in your own back garden. Something is better than nothing, and as people mentioned at the start, it can lift your mood, help improve things like stiffness and all the benefits that we spoke about this morning. Long-term participation is so important, because as soon as you stop, the reversibility aspect kicks in. So unfortunately, the gains that you maintained will not be maintained unless you keep participating. So again, we'll just have a little chat box if you would like to consider just sharing what type of exercise you enjoy. So just there's a little message from the MS Society about the Zoom classes, and information can be found on the MS Ireland website. So just seeing a few comments coming through here: a rowing machine, a good walk, treadmill and walking and swimming, walking down by the sea. Oh my goodness, yeah. It'd be lovely to get to the sea, swimming, cycling, weight training. Yeah, absolutely, super. Exercise, bike, walking at the moment. Walking is so accessible. I like cycling, but can't at the moment. Yeah, so I think a lot of us are experiencing new barriers to exercise that we wouldn't have experienced before at the moment. Is there any exercise that's not recommended for people with MS? That's a really good question. So basically, as long as you're safe doing it and that you're medically well and stable, there's no reason why you can't try out something. But what I would say is, if your balance is really, really unsteady, like going for a run is just not going to be realistic. So it's about finding something that's at the right level for you, depending on your ability and depending on your goals. And safety is the key component. So intensity wise, really, as long as you're medically well, you don't have any other conditions like, heart problems, breathing problems, your physiotherapist or doctor can go through a screening tool with you for an individual. Someone's just CrossFit, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so some really great examples there. Yeah, doing some weights, super, okay. Can I continue to do Irish dancing? If you enjoy it and you feel safe doing it, absolutely. As long as it's not challenging your balance to the extent where you might fall, for example, or I can't think of anything else. If you have Uthoff's phenomenon, so if you're feeling any pins and needles numbness during the exercise, just know how to mitigate that by trying to keep cool as best you can. But I'd say if you're doing something, do your best to try and keep doing it if you enjoy it and it's part of your life. Again, it mightn't be for everyone. Maybe you've danced all your life and it's really core to who you are almost. So what I'd say, there's no absolutes. So that there's no like clear cut, like, it's not like that everyone should do Irish dancing, but certainly if it's, something that you enjoy, that's feasible for you and you'd like to continue with it, and there are no other reasons why you shouldn't, then absolutely do as much as you can for as long as you can and do what you enjoy. Life's too short to be not doing something that you enjoy. And a lot of people live so well with multiple sclerosis, and to think about people giving up something that they love and that's passionate about them because of these new circumstances. Absolutely, just keep going as best you can. Now I'm going to share my screen again, folks, because I'm conscious of time as well, and I hope that you're all really comfortable at home and that you can use the opportunity to stand up, sit down, move around, get a cup of tea, whatever needs to happen, for you to bear with us. Some barriers to exercise, as I mentioned before, we have some disease specific barriers, and these include things like fatigue, continence, pain, spasticity. We know that exercise is beneficial for all of these outcomes from the published research, and some of the barriers now might be different for people. So if continence was previously a really big concern for anybody, now being able to do it in the comfort and safety of your own home with accessibility mightn't be as much of an issue as it was previously. Environmental barriers include things like access to facilities, time, temperature and cost. I heard someone say recently, I think it was one of these WhatsApps that were going around during the first wave, saying, oh, it takes a special kind of somebody to be late for work for when you're going from your bedroom to your kitchen. But access to facilities used to be a barrier for people. I don't know how people feel about that now. Obviously a lot of places are closed, but if you can do it at home, it cuts out maybe some of that circumstance. Time, temperature and cost. So previously, this was an example from a study we did a long time ago. Cost was a perceived barrier for people with MS in terms of accessing gym and equipment and things like that. But now we're doing so much online, it can take out some of that aspect of it. And then psychological, so things like motivation, embarrassment and fear of falling. So motivation, having that weekly check-in on my class can work really well for some people. Going with a friend, at social distance and everything. Embarrassment. So the beauty of doing a lot of the online work as well is you can remain anonymous to a degree, in terms of like you're not going into a gym maybe where people have different abilities to you and things like that. And then fear of falling as well. And then we can overcome a lot of that by using appropriately scaled exercise and supports in your own environment. So again, we might just use the chat box because these are new times, and it would be nice to know what are people's current barriers to exercise. So what specifically makes it difficult to exercise at the moment? Yeah, so things like COVID, physical barriers, can't get to the sea, weather dependent, fatigue and stiffness, space, small apartment. Yeah, so very different ones to ones that we would have seen before. The pain, space. So we still have environmental, we still have disease specific, and then lack of motivation. Someone said they're a new mum, congratulations. I recently was involved in a different resource in Kildare. So on the Kildare Sports Partnership website, there's a whole suite and package of perinatal exercise advice from our physiotherapy department there. So for the new mum, if you'd like to check out Kildare Sports Partnership, they have a suite of online resources that might be interesting to look at the postnatal period. Swimming pool, no access. Stiffness, need someone to come with this particular person when you go outside. Yeah, so it's really harder to access people and the weather, so different environmental barriers. Okay, so any ideas of a few solutions around some of those? So difficulty in finding the right exercise, somebody with other conditions as well. So again, in a physiotherapy-led exercise, we're used to dealing with people with all sorts of conditions, and often a very mix. I work in primary care, and people very rarely came in the door with one particular condition or challenge. So part of our role as physiotherapists is to be able to consider each individual's circumstances and try and find a way to facilitate exercise. So any solutions to some of these barriers? Or have you found any solutions yourself? Yeah, setting a plan, joining support groups, organization. Yeah, super. Okay, I'm conscious of time. My mum is from Cork and my dad was born in Kerry, so I will talk forever. Yeah, so I'm just seeing a few other comments there about renting weights from the gym, trying to get the walk done in the morning. I can't keep up, there's so many comments. I hope we'll be able to maybe capture this somehow afterwards. Doing the online exercise, finding them great. It's great to hear. Yeah, someone found the benefits of moving and helping the blood flow. This is wonderful to get so many comments, because when we do the face-to-face, sometimes we don't have this opportunity for sharing so much in such a short time frame. So thanks everybody for your participation. Okay, so hopefully we are back on our presentation. Okay, so some facilitators include self-management strategies, environmental strategies, structured group exercise, so having an instructor, having a peer support or a group, and just finding the right type. I think that's really, really key. So if you have disease-specific barriers or individual challenges, sometimes having a brainstorm can really, really help. Either talking with your family and friends, maybe other people with MS, or a chartered physiotherapist can all help you try and find solutions. And when you have a reduction in MS symptoms, so sometimes people find it like a 24-hour pattern where, you know, you might have maybe more fatigue later on in the day or worse symptoms at different times. So somebody mentioned there to get a walk first thing in the morning. Sometimes that's a really good time, and then it's done for the day. And I know some other people, in one of my classes, we have somebody who likes to do it last thing before bedtime, because when you're really tired after doing the exercise, that's the time then to go to bed. So different things work for different people. Someone mentioned goal setting as well. So we'll do a small little bit on this, and really it needs to be valued in or rooted in a value system. So that comes back to thinking about what's important to you. Someone mentioned Irish dancing, someone else mentioned CrossFit, someone else mentioned weights. It has to be something that is really, really important to you, and think about why you're doing it. So for dancing, it might be to participate with your friends, or maybe nieces and nephews, or someone in the family. You know, when you're doing your exercise, you're thinking of your overall purpose. So be it like to lift your mood, to improve your strength, to be able to run around in the garden with the kids or something. Like it's really about trying to find something that's meaningful for you. It is important that the goals are SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And when we think about goals as well, a lot of people think about, oh, it's because I want to lose weight in 3 months' time in order to fit into a dress for the summer. But when we talk about, so that's an outcome goal. Let's think about something in the future. That's a long time away. That's the ultimate end point to where you want to get to. But when we think about process goals, we're thinking about action plans. So what am I doing today? What am I doing next week? And specifically thinking where, when, how, with who, in what circumstances. So for example, today, while I'm making my breakfast, I am going to do 10 stand up and sit downs while I'm waiting for the kettle to boil. Or, you know, that's a very specific process goal. So I'm thinking about the action around which I'm doing it. So again, you might think about your process goal for next week. Might be on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to get on my raincoat, throw on my wellies and my waterproof boots at all costs. I am going to do a 10-minute walk around the park outside my house. Or it's about really thinking about the process. So not so much what you're going to achieve by doing all of these things cumulatively over time, but setting a plan, trying to identify the facilitators, overcome those barriers, and thinking, sometimes you need to think about a plan B. So let's say if it was snowing next week, or ice, for example, and you actually can't get out for a walk and it's not safe to do so. It's about having a plan B maybe in your home setting, or finding a way around it. So it's your action plan, but then thinking about the plan B as well, so you still are able to achieve something that's specific, measurable. So by specific, we're thinking, you know, just to take that example of sit to stands while we're waiting for the kettle to boil, it's very specific, it's measurable, so we have 10, it's achievable because I know I'm able to do that from where I currently am, it's timely, so it's while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, for example, and it's realistic. So thinking about all of those factors. One of the resources that's really, really good to check is the Canadian Multiple Sclerosis Society. They've got some really great resources online about especially your backup plan. So in terms of having a plan B, when you have a lovely plan to do your exercise and then things don't work out, it's being able to come into that mindset of having a plan B. Another great resource is the MS Trust website. So they have some nice demonstrations of exercises there as well, using little stick men. Accessing physiotherapy then, so this is a lot of the questions that were coming up at the start, can be through your hospital neurology team, either as an inpatient, outpatient, or in the community. And the community are still running and delivering physiotherapy interventions. So your GP can refer you, other primary care team members can refer you. Unfortunately, because of COVID and redeployment, it can make it challenging to access. However, we do prioritise our caseload, and if there is a critical incident, for example, in the context of something like, unfortunately, a relapse or a fall, those factors do influence our prioritization. So depending on what's on your referral, you might be able to access physiotherapy sooner rather than later. As I said, through primary care, and then MS Ireland have our Zoom classes, and they have information on their website. When should I access physiotherapists? Or physiotherapy? I think it's really important at initial diagnosis, so to find out exactly what's safe and appropriate and feasible for you after a specific relapse period. So if you have a worsening of symptoms, particularly if it's impacting on your function and your participation. A critical incident, so unfortunately a lot of people with MS experience falls, so if you do have a fall, definitely mention to your GP, include your physiotherapist, because it's often related to balance and strength. There are lots of reasons why people fall, but it's important to be able to identify exactly what your contributing factors were, and then trying to minimize that risk going forward. And then for symptom management as well, so we specialize in weakness, stiffness, pain, reduced balance, reduced mobility, and bladder problems. Now, not every physiotherapist does work in pelvic health, so in terms of continence issues, bladder, bowel issues, but there is particular resources on the ISCP website, so the Irish Society of Chartered Physiotherapists. And if you look for a physiotherapist in women's or men's health, they would be able to guide anybody with those specific problems. So in our Zoom classes, just in terms of going through a few things that you might like to know in terms of expectations. So the first thing we need to know is the safety of the participant and safety of the data. And people are often very concerned about that in terms of your privacy. So for safety of participants, we start off with a medical screen, one-to-one. And that's just asking questions about your general health, and we can guide you towards your GP if we felt it was necessary. The safety of your, in terms of balance. So we go through like a movement screen to make sure that we know that you are safe to do the exercises and that we can know how to scale them appropriately. And then we do an environmental check as well. So what kind of support you have nearby in terms of like your family and props and space, and I suppose what's in your own environment to facilitate that exercise. And we can work around nearly every circumstance. There's always a way. In terms of data, people are often very concerned about their privacy and anonymity. So we use Zoom for healthcare. So it's not just a regular Zoom, it's Zoom for healthcare. And we have particular privacy features for that. So it's enabled, there's a waiting room. So you'll only be allowed into the class if we know who you are and we see your name and we've screened you beforehand. Once you're in the class, we lock it. So other people can't, Zoom bomb you or get into the class as such. Now, sometimes there's issues with connectivity and things like that. We need to try and mitigate that, but we're very conscious of the safety of the participant and the safety of your data and your privacy and confidentiality. So we also get your name, your contact details, your next of kin, and the contact at the venue where you're exercising, and your air code. So just in the case of an emergency, this has never happened, thankfully, and hopefully it never will. But an air code is a really quick way for the emergency services to find you if it was necessary. And then if you dropped connection and that wasn't usual for you and we couldn't connect with you by phone, for example, that we have someone either at your venue or maybe close by, or someone that we can contact on your behalf to check on you. So like connection issues happen quite regularly, but you can usually link in with everybody by phone and make sure everybody's okay. But if it was the case that we couldn't contact somebody after dropping off and we were concerned about their safety, that we have somebody to be able to call for you. So with the participant screening, we look at, why do we do it at all, like compared to maybe just get going with the exercise or straight into a gym, for example. Even all the gyms now do a screening anyway for everybody. But people with MS sometimes have other conditions, have poor balance, or on medications. So these are factors that we like to consider in our application to exercise, but also just to make sure you're safe. But as I said before, there are very few conditions or circumstances where people can't participate to some degree. We use a standard questionnaire to achieve that, and then, as I said, the physical environmental screening as well. So the main take-home messages for today are, I hope that you will now know, if you didn't know beforehand, that exercise can improve the main problems reported by people with MS, and that any uncertainty that you had around that or questions, particularly around diagnosis, people are very concerned, and there are a lot of unanswered questions that happen in those early days. And sometimes, you hear things, but you don't really hear them at that time. But it really can improve the main problems reported by people with MS. It's important to consider specificity. So what it is that you want to achieve, and trying to find the exercise to achieve that. So if you want to get stronger, that we're doing strengthening training. If you want to improve your balance, that we target some balance training. If you want to get fitter, that we include cardiorespiratory exercise, and also personal preference. So what it is that you enjoy, what lights you up, and what it is that you're most likely to participate in the long term. And then thinking about that long-term adherence, because we know that the benefits reduce once you stop exercising. So thinking about overcoming the barriers, identifying facilitators, and setting some goals to help with your long-term adherence to exercise. So on that note, I would be delighted to welcome any questions and answers that people might have. And I think Aoife is going to hopefully facilitate our Q&A for us as well.
So Maria, first of all, we just really like to thank you for a fantastic presentation. It was just full of practical advice and so empowering for people. And I think that our attendees will have found it very valuable in taking positive steps forward for themselves. Thanks also to the attendees for being so interactive in the chat box. And so we have had some questions in through the Q&A function, and then we were sent some in advance of today's session 2. So I'll take the one from the Q&A box first, and this person is asking about exercise and if exercise can help with the medication that they've been on, and they found that they have a weight increase of 0.6 pounds per month since they started, but they're using a treadmill and watching calories. So would you have any advice for that person?
So I have not heard of, I suppose my understanding is that your weight is increasing as a result of being on Copaxone. And I haven't heard of the specific side effects of particular medications like that and things. So the first thing I would say is maybe talk to your nurse practitioner or your specialist nurse around the expectations around the medication, and just see if there's something that's expected, and maybe any ways to mitigate that. And then in terms of treadmill training and watching calories, like absolutely, I suppose the first thing to check is, I suppose why you would be putting on weight with that medication. The very first thing I would do is definitely check in with your nurse practitioner. And then once it has been outruled that there's any particular reasons for that weight gain and that you're safe to participate in exercise, like if you're using a treadmill already and you're finding it tolerable and everything like that, it's absolutely fine. Watching calories, I suppose I'm not in a position to give specific dietary advice. Strength training might actually augment, I suppose, your weight concerns, in that I suppose it thinks about body composition. So you'd be changing, body composition from fatty or adipose tissue to more efficient muscle tissue. Now the thing is with strength training, sometimes you could see increases in weight because muscle weighs heavier than fat. So I suppose weight is kind of a little bit more of a challenging question, but my key advice to that person is maybe just check in with your nurse practitioner first around that as a side effect. And then once you have understanding of why that's occurring, then I suppose you can move forward with that particular advice. And maybe usually the nurse practitioners are really good to talk about things like diet and exercise as well, particularly in the context of changes in medication. But I suppose exercise can be helpful in terms of managing weight generally. Diet is obviously of key importance as well. So just calorie control, but I suppose I'm not really in a position to advise on diet as such in particular.
That's fine. So I might take a question that was sent in to us before the session as well. And it was somebody who's wondering, so they said that with the pandemic that they're having very low mood and they're finding it very difficult to find motivation, to find and maintain motivation for exercise, and are wondering if you have any tips for finding and maintaining that motivation.
Yeah, so it's really hard. These times are very, very strange. The main thing, what I would say is set your exercise plan in terms of, having a process goal, and as best you can try and stick to it. What I would say is action precedes motivation. So if we're waiting for the motivation to come, sometimes it won't come. But simply by taking that action and taking that first step, it can help to lift your mood. So I would say action precedes motivation. Sometimes we can't wait for that motivation to come because it's really, really, really hard, especially now at the dark evenings and things like that. The second thing maybe to consider is some peer support. So these can be really isolating times, and it's very challenging to kind of generate that I suppose enthusiasm and motivation yourself, but sometimes having some external accountability, like knowing you have to show up to a class once a week and that you're going to meet other people, having that external drive can help to help with that motivation as well. Other things are like some real-time feedback. So let's say even a simple pedometer or a step counter. A lot of people's phones or smartphones have them now. You wouldn't have to spend money on it or things like that. And even setting yourself a little goal every day that you want to achieve some steps. So having that external focus. So taking the focus off what's internally bothering you sometimes, and sometimes we need to do that too. Sometimes we draw attention to how we feel and things like that, but action planning, some peer support, and maybe some external goals as well, where you're aiming to achieve a certain step count, for example, might help with those motivation challenges.
Great. Thank you. And we'll just take one more question because I'm just conscious of time, and I'm going to take this from the Q&A box. And the question is, I have issues with balance on my right side since my first relapse in July. Do you recommend any exercise to help improve this?
Yeah, so I suppose balance issues present for lots of different reasons. So it can be because that right side feels number, and on the other side, it can be because it's weaker, it can be because of poor coordination or tightness. So asymmetries or differences side to side can present for lots of different reasons. So I would definitely suggest, because it's, I suppose, a unique symptom that has lots of different causes, and because you had a recent relapse, I would actually suggest an assessment with a chartered physiotherapist to find the specific exercises that would be beneficial in your circumstance. And that can be accessed either through MS Society or through a private physiotherapist, which can be accessed through the iscp.ie, or through your community physiotherapist, which would be through your GP. They can advise you on that local piece as well. So I suppose the main thing is it needs to be assessed in the context of your particular circumstances, and the fact that you have balance issues and a relapse, they would what we would kind of categorize as important priorities in the community setting. So hopefully that you won't experience any barriers getting to a chartered physiotherapist.
That's great. Well, Maria, thank you once again for joining us this morning and providing us with so much wonderful information. We can't thank you enough for it. It's much appreciated by MS Ireland, by all at MS Ireland. And again, I think the attendees will take so much valuable information from this. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Not at all, Aoife, thank you. And just to remind people that the information on the Zoom classes is on the MS Society website. And I will circulate the slides today, and maybe just a sheet of some exercises that are accessible for most people after today as well. And thank you all for your really active engagement this morning. It made it a lot easier for me here in my sitting room. So thanks everybody, and enjoy your morning.